Parents planned, Arson to cash insurance and frame me. My GF helped, my brother lit the fire, and police caught him with gasoline. Everyone went to jail. As a 28-year-old male, I grew up as the invisible second son in a family where my older brother, Logan Pierce, 32, was treated as if he were king. Do you know those households where one child can do no wrong and everyone else exists just to promote that child's narrative? That basically sums up my childhood. I was the forgotten son, the afterthought, the one who existed solely to make Logan Pierce appear better in contrast. Growing up in the Pierce household was like being a background character in someone else's film. Logan Pierce was always seen as the most successful by my parents. Not because he accomplished anything exceptional, but because he had a knack for puffing himself up while achieving the absolute minimum. The guy could fail an exam and then convince my parents that he was wronged by a prejudiced teacher. He might smash a car and make it appear as if he were a hero who escaped a terrible scenario. He could arrive late to everything and still be commended for getting things done. Meanwhile, I'd bring home straight A's and be told I needed to work harder, like Logan Pierce purportedly did. I'd work my tail off at extracurricular activities and hardly get a nod of recognition. I'd help around the house without being asked, and all I got was criticism for what I did wrong. Allow me to paint you a vivid picture of what life was like. Logan Pierce, then 17, smashed my father's truck into a mailbox while texting. Not just a small bump either. He completely destroyed the mailbox, fractured the truck's bumper, and shattered a headlight. My parents responded by buying him his own automobile within a month so that he could learn responsibility for his own vehicle. They reasoned that if he owned his own car, he would take better care of it. Spoiler alert, he didn't. He also ruined that car within 9 months. When I was 17, I acquired a part-time job bagging groceries at my local supermarket. I worked every weekend and 4 evenings a week during the academic year. I saved every single salary for 3 years to purchase a beat-up Honda Civic with 218,000 miles on it. My parents' contribution is $0. When I drove it home, they said, "Just don't expect us to pay for the insurance or gas. You have a job now." Meanwhile, despite the fact that Logan Pierce was 21 years old and had already totaled one vehicle, they continued to pay for his insurance. The preference extended beyond tangible items. It was integrated into every part of our family dynamic. Every discourse centered around Logan Pierce. Every family event revolved on his accomplishments, no matter how modest. Every holiday was a celebration of Logan Pierce's current activities. Christmas was always a Logan Pierce holiday, with me as an afterthought. I still remember this Christmas when I was 15. Logan Pierce's stack of presents was so high that it resembled a retail display. A new gaming console, the latest games, designer clothing, an expensive watch, and nearly $1,000 in gift cards. My pile had 4 packages, a sweater 2 sizes too big, a box of socks, a gift card to the grocery shop where I worked, Real Inventive, Mom, and a copy of some self-help book about attaining your full potential. Nothing I asked for. Nothing indicated that they were aware of my genuine interests or hobbies. When I looked dejected, Mom just stated, "Logan's graduating soon. He needs things for his future." Never mind that I was also a high school student with my own future to consider. Never mind that I had given her a detailed list of what I wanted, the majority of which were less expensive than what Logan Pierce received. The double standards applied to everything. Logan Pierce received a D in calculus, so my parents hired a tutor, criticized the teacher, and eventually changed the grade through a series of complaints to the principal. When I received a B+ in advanced placement history, my father expressed disappointment and wondered why I hadn't tried more. A B+ indicated a lack of effort, whereas a D demanded pity and assistance. When Logan Pierce stayed out beyond curfew, my folks felt he was just having fun with his pals and told him to text the next time. When I arrived home 20 minutes late from work because my manager wanted me to remain and help close, I was grounded for a week. Work did not seem to be an acceptable reason, but Logan Pierce's social life was precious and untouchable. I recall one occasion in 10th grade when we both had events on the same Saturday. Logan Pierce played a regular season basketball game, nothing extraordinary. I had the regional finals for the academic decathlon, which I had been preparing on for months. Guess which event my parents attended? They did not even pretend to be conflicted about it. Mom just remarked, "Logan needs more support, you'll do fine on your own." I earned first place in my division. They learned 4 days later when a neighbor congratulated them. The message was clear from the beginning. Logan Pierce was important, and I was merely there to fill in. Any accomplishment of mine was treated with indifference or criticism, whereas Logan Pierce's bare minimum efforts drew standing ovations. After a while, I simply stopped sharing things with them. What was the point? Logan Pierce attended college on his parents' dime. changing majors 4 times and graduating with a business degree that he never utilized. He failed classes, retook them, and generally saw higher education as an extended vacation. My parents paid for his entire tuition, purchased him a car for campus, gave him spending money, and covered his apartment rent. I worked 2 jobs and took a full school load. I received a scholarship that covered the majority of my tuition, but I still needed to pay for books, food, and my half of a small apartment with 4 roommates. I graduated with honors in accounting after 4 years and received a job offer from a regional firm. My parents responded to my graduation with a single congratulations SMS from my mother. Congrats. Don't forget Logan Pierce's birthday dinner is Saturday. No card, no gift, and no celebratory supper. Just a reminder to show up for Logan Pierce. By the time I was 24 and starting my career at the accounting firm, I had very much accepted my position in the family hierarchy. I was the dependable one. The one they called when they needed something done correctly, the one that showed up when requested and never complained. But I was never the person they celebrated or prioritized. Now, this is where my parents' business enters the scene, and it is critical to understanding why they eventually attempted to destroy my life. Pierce Hardware and Home Supply, a medium-sized hardware store in our town, was started by my father about 18 years ago. It started modest, with just my father and 3 employees in a tight storefront. However, it continued to grow steadily over time. They relocated to a larger space, recruited more employees, and expanded into home renovation supplies and seasonal products. By the time I graduated from college, it had become a local institution. Originally, my grandfather had a dream about starting a business. Grandpa Harold Pierce had spent his entire life working in construction and had always wanted to open a hardware store where workers could acquire quality products and honest guidance. When he died, he left my father enough money to fully realize that goal. Dad named it Pierce Hardware, in honor of Grandpa Harold. My parents never really included me in the business, despite my evident qualifications. Logan Pierce was always their preferred successor, despite his lack of enthusiasm in really working. He had some ambiguous title like operations consultant, which really meant he turned up when he felt like it, made grand statements about stuff he didn't understand, and got paid for doing nothing of significance. I've offered to help with their books several times over the years. I was truly an accountant who specialized in small business finance. I could have analyzed their systems, streamlined their tax status, assisted them with budgeting and planning, and spotted issues before they turned into disasters. But my father usually brushed me off with, "We've got it handled. Don't worry about it, Logan's taking care of that side of things." One time I sat down with my father and showed him a basic cash flow analysis I'd created using publicly available store statistics. I identified some troubling tendencies and proposed some modifications that could improve their margins. He stared at it for about 45 seconds saying, "Interesting," and then turned the conversation to something Logan Pierce was doing. He didn't mention it again. That study would have revealed they were in trouble 3 years before the crisis occurred. But what did I know? I was just a real financial professional. Logan Pierce's handling of the finances was like putting a baby in charge of air traffic control. The guy couldn't balance a checkbook, let alone handle a small business's finances. He'd authorize orders without verifying inventories, give his buddies discounts without tracking them, and overall treat the store as if it were his personal piggy bank. But in my parents' perspective, he couldn't do anything wrong. So he was definitely the best candidate for managing their livelihood. Around 5 years ago I met Madeline Maddie Cross at a friend's birthday celebration. She was lovely, and her laugh made you feel like you were the funniest person in the room. She was smart, personable, and appeared to be really interested in me as a person. After years of being disregarded by my own family, having someone notice me felt amazing. We began dating, and everything seemed ideal. She supported my career, promoted my hobbies, and truly listened to what I had to say about my life. She recalled everything I told her, asked follow-up questions, and appeared genuinely interested in my progress. She also mentioned the correct things regarding my familial situation. When I told her about the latest instance of Logan Pierce favoritism, she'd shake her head and say, "You deserve so much better. They don't appreciate what they have." She'd attend my work gatherings and captivate my coworkers. She'd organize thoughtful dates and surprise me with small things to demonstrate she was paying attention. On my birthday, she threw me a genuine party with friends which my own family had never done. I felt I had finally found someone who respected me as much as I deserved. Looking back, I see she was gathering information the entire time. Every complaint I made about my family, every financial detail I provided, and every irritation I voiced over being missed, she saved for later. She was creating a profile of me, including my vulnerabilities and relationship with my family. She knew exactly which buttons to press because I'd shown her where they all were, but I didn't realize it at the time. We moved in together after around 15 months of dating. We rented a wonderful apartment on the better side of town, divided expenditures, and played house like any other couple. I felt truly happy for the first time in years. I even started thinking about proposing, looking at rings during my lunch breaks, and visualizing our future together. Madeline has been spending more time with my family for the last 15 months or so. She would attend family gatherings even when I couldn't because of work deadlines. She'd stop by my mother's house for coffee, run errands for her, and develop her own relationship without me. I thought it was sweet. I assumed she was attempting to bridge the gap between me and my family. What I didn't realize was that she was also developing a completely different type of relationship with Logan Pierce, and it wasn't the sibling-in-law variety. About 9 months before everything went down, I began to notice some strange things. Little discrepancies that, while not adding up on their own, formed a pattern when viewed collectively. Madeline grew more discreet about her phone. She'd slant the screen away from me while texting, leave the room to take calls, and claim it was work-related, even on weekends when her office was closed. She began going to the gym at weird hours, returning home at 10:45 p.m., claiming to have completed an evening spin class, but having no prior interest in spinning. Then there were changes in my familial interactions. Logan Pierce was suddenly very interested in our relationship, asking pointed questions about how things were going, whether we were happy, and whether I was treating her well enough. "Oh, you're working late. That's fine. Madeline can still come to dinner." The first serious alarm went off roughly 7 months ago. I had a client appointment canceled unexpectedly on a Saturday afternoon, so I decided to surprise Madeline. She informed me that she was visiting her sister, who lived about 2.5 hours away. But on a whim, I went to my parents' place first to get a tool I'd borrowed my father months before. Her automobile was in my parents' driveway. When I entered through the back door, like I often did, I discovered her and Logan Pierce seated close together on the couch in the living room. They jerked apart when they noticed me, giving that guilty flinch that people do when they are caught doing something wrong. "What are you doing here?" Madeline said, and the way she phrased it, as if I were the one who didn't belong, should have revealed everything. She claimed she altered her plans at the last minute and opted to go see my mother instead of traveling all the way to her sister's. Logan Pierce said he was only there for lunch. My mother arrived from the kitchen, backing them up with a stiff smile that did not reach her eyes. Everything seemed odd, but I couldn't put my finger on why. I wanted to believe them. I desperately wanted to trust them. The alternative was too awful to contemplate. So I swallowed my suspicions and let it go. A big mistake. Huge. Over the next few weeks I paid more attention to everything. Late nights became more frequent. The hidden texts persisted. Madeline Maddie Cross would tighten up whenever Logan Pierce's name was mentioned in conversation. I started putting together a picture that I didn't want to see. Then, on a Thursday night around 5 months ago, I did something I'm not proud of. Madeline Maddie Cross left her phone open on the nightstand while she was taking a shower. After weeks of building skepticism, I finally looked. What I discovered made my stomach drop to my feet. Months of texts between her and Logan Pierce. Romantic and sexual, with plans for their future together once they dealt with me. There were declarations of love, inside jokes, and open chats about how they couldn't wait to be together. But what I discovered was worse than the affair. Conversations with my parents regarding a strategy involving the store. He won't suspect anything if he receives messages like, "Once the insurance pays out, we'll have enough to start fresh." He is overly trusting, and this will solve all our issues. I took screenshots of everything, sent them to my personal email, removed the email from my sent folder, and returned the phone to where I found it, screen down, just as she had left. Then I sat in the dark bedroom, listening to the shower run, trying to process the fact that my fiancé, brother, and apparently my parents were all working against me over something involving insurance money. Perhaps confronting them right away would have been a better idea. But something told me I didn't have the complete picture yet. If I tipped my hand too soon, they might change their plans, cover their tracks, and find a new way to accomplish whatever they had planned. So I made a decision that contradicted every feeling I had. I waited, watched, and got additional information. Over the next 4 weeks I perfected the roles of the ignorant boyfriend and the overlooked son. I smiled at Madeline Maddie Cross, made small talk with Logan Pierce when he came around, and went to my parents for Sunday dinners as if nothing was wrong, but I was listening to everything, monitoring their body language, and keeping track of who was texting who and when. I also began doing some digging on my own. Through some public record searches and chats with an old classmate who worked at the local bank, I cobbled together a horrific story. Pierce Hardware was not only suffering, but also drowning in debt. Logan Pierce's poor administration has ruined it over the years. They had taken out loans, maxed their credit lines, and were about to face foreclosure on the building in 8 months. I checked the county records for the property, 4 liens. I reviewed the state database for UCCC filings and found multiple secured creditors. I even drove by the store many times during business hours to count customers and monitor traffic patterns. The place was nearly empty most days. Whatever my parents told people about how successful the firm was, the figures reflected a totally different tale. Instead of asking me, their son, the accountant, for assistance with their failing business, they chose a different approach: insurance fraud. Here's what I learned from the texts and overheard pieces of conversations over the course of several weeks. They intended to fire down the store and say arson was committed by an outsider. The insurance settlement would wipe off their obligations and provide them with enough money to start afresh. A clean slate, a fresh start, with no consequences. They'd even discussed using some of the money to help Logan Pierce and Maddie Cross relocate to a warmer climate, such as Florida or Arizona. But arson investigations are comprehensive. Insurance companies do not simply hand over $500,000 without asking questions. They dispatch investigators, recruit forensic experts, and search for contradictions and stories. They'd need someone to blame, someone to take the fall, someone whose motivation would satisfy investigators and allow them to collect their money without being scrutinized. Guess who they had chosen as their scapegoat? They had ignored and belittled their son for 28 years. Me. The concept was actually quite elaborate for a family of idiots that couldn't manage a hardware business. They had been setting me up for months, but I had been too preoccupied with the Maddie Cross scenario to notice. Apparently, my father had been telling store employees that I was upset about being kicked out of the family business. He'd told suppliers that his younger son had resentment issues and had made vague threats against the store. My mother had been hinting to relatives that I had been acting strangely recently and making disturbing remarks about feeling underappreciated. Logan Pierce had been feeding Maddie Cross precise lines to use against me if anyone inquired about my mental health. They were creating a narrative in which I was portrayed as the resentful, ignored kid who eventually snapped and exacted revenge on the family business that had abandoned him. Maddie Cross played several different roles. She was intended to give Logan Pierce an alibi on the night of the fire. They intended to claim they had been to a concert together in another city. She was about to discover bogus evidence pointing to me, which they had planted in our apartment. And once the insurance paid out and I was facing criminal charges, she and Logan Pierce would flee with their portion of the money, leaving me to rot. The night they chose to carry out their plan was a Thursday, roughly 4 weeks after I discovered the texts. Logan Pierce was meant to be attending a business meeting 3.5 hours away with Maddie Cross as his assistant. My parents were visiting my aunt 75 minutes in the opposite way, creating their own alibi. And me? I was meant to be alone in our flat, with no one to confirm my whereabouts. Except I wasn't the gullible idiot they assumed I was. Not anymore. The day before their planned arson, I went to the police station, walked in with a folder full of proof, and requested to talk with someone about stopping a crime. The desk sergeant looked at me as if I were insane until I explained what I had. They assigned me a detective named Laura Bennett, a no-nonsense woman in her early 50s who appeared to have seen it all. She listened to my entire account without interrupting, studied the screenshots I had printed, and examined the timeline I had created. "Let me get this straight," she remarked after I finished, reclining back in her chair. "Your parents, your brother, and your girlfriend are planning to commit arson at your family's business tomorrow night, and they're going to frame you for it to collect insurance money." "Yes, ma'am. I know it sounds insane, but look at these texts." She spent a long time going over everything. Her expression didn't vary much, but I noticed her brow furrow a few times when she received particularly harsh messages. "This is pretty explicit," she finally said. "They really discussed this over text. They aren't precisely criminal masterminds." She nearly grinned at that. "No, I suppose not." She was quiet for another minute while reading. "And are you sure about the timeline? What about tomorrow night? Based on the texts and discussions that I overheard." "Yes. They've been planning this for months, but the real arson is scheduled to occur tomorrow between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. Detective Laura Bennett stared at me for a long time, as if she was trying to decide whether I was genuine or a lunatic. What she saw in my face must have persuaded her. "Okay," she replied. "Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to acquire authorization to have police monitor the store tomorrow night, and we'll have units in the neighborhood. If things goes as you suggest, we'll catch them in the act." That night I went to a downtown hotel and paid for my room in cash, so there would be no credit card trail. I was not taking any chances with my location. The room featured a television, a bed, and a window that overlooked the city. I sat there, watching late-night shows without actually seeing them, waiting for my phone to ring, hoping I was correct, but also praying I was wrong. My phone rang at 3:01 a.m. Mr. Pierce. Detective Laura Bennett's voice was tense with repressed enthusiasm. You were correct. We caught them. The relief that came over me was palpable. My hands were so shaky that I almost dropped the phone. She recounted what had transpired. Logan Pierce and another man, a friend of his, had arrived at the store around 2:32 a.m., with accelerant containers. They had turned off what they thought was the only surveillance camera and ignited a fire in the back stock area. What they didn't realize was that officers were watching from unmarked vehicles nearby. The officers responded as soon as they observed flames, and the fire department came within minutes. The fire was restricted to the stockroom and a portion of the rear office before spreading to the main retail level. Logan Pierce and his friend were arrested on the spot after being detected with accelerant on their clothing and lighters in their pockets. The building was damaged but not demolished. Insurance investigators ultimately determined that the fire was definitely arson, and security footage revealed who was to blame. There's more, Detective Laura Bennett explained. We've also called in your parents for interrogation. They were at your aunt's place, as you mentioned. But when we informed them of the arrest, your father's reaction was clear. He instantly began making excuses for your brother before we even told him about the allegations. And there's a woman here who claims to be your girlfriend and was waiting in a car 3 blocks away from the store. She's asking for a lawyer. Maddie Cross, of course, was present. I couldn't allow Logan Pierce commit a felony without being present for moral support. The following several hours were a haze. I went to the police station, gave a formal statement, and officially presented all of my evidence. I watched from a window as the people I'd most trusted in this world were processed one by one. My father was in handcuffs, appearing smaller than I had ever seen him. My mother was crying and screaming she didn't know anything, her makeup streaming down her face. Logan Pierce looked astonished, as if he couldn't believe what was happening to him. The golden child has never experienced a consequence in his life. Maddie Cross, mascara smeared and wanting to speak with someone in charge, is still attempting to negotiate her way out of this dilemma. My father attempted to spot me through the window at one point. When our gazes met, he began shouting something, which I couldn't hear through the glass. I did not need to hear it. I didn't want to know what justification or appeal he was making. During their interrogations, my parents initially attempted to play the concerned parent. They claimed they had no knowledge what Logan Pierce was intending, that they were as astonished as everyone else, and that there must have been a mistake. This lasted approximately 10 minutes, until investigators showed them the text messages I had provided. My mother described the plan's timeline in great detail. The ones in which my father estimated exactly how much insurance would pay out. The ones where they said I wouldn't see it coming. During his interrogation, my father looked at the camera and stated that he would never amount to anything. At the very least, he'd serve a purpose. Detective Laura Bennett showed me the video later. She said she had seen a lot of bad parents in her career, but this one stood out. The evidence against each of them was overwhelming. Here's the beautiful part, the one that sealed their fate. My parents made one key blunder in their brilliant strategy. They forgot about the store's surveillance cameras. When they upgraded the security system a few years ago, they assumed they had configured it to only record locally. Delete after 45 days. There's no cloud backup. Nice and private. But they had messed up the configuration. The system had been quietly uploading everything to a cloud server the whole time. Every recording is automatically backed up and stored for 30 months. Every conversation in the back office about this scheme was recorded. Logan Pierce and Maddie Cross's meetings at the store to coordinate details were all captured on video. Every detail of their conspiracy was documented and automatically uploaded to a server they had no idea existed. The investigators discovered months of footage. My parents huddled in the back office, literally drawing diagrams of how they'd make the fire look like it was started by me. Logan Pierce and Maddie Cross have romantic encounters in the stockroom between planning sessions. My father practiced what he would say to insurance adjusters. My mother was researching arson signs on the office computer, presumably so they wouldn't leave those signs. It was as if they had produced their own true crime documentary and then given it to the prosecutors. On top of the video evidence, there were texts, emails, and bank records indicating money transfers between all of them as they prepared for their new lives. My father's computer contained web searches for how insurance fraud investigations work, arson detection methods, and signs of accelerant use. They had literally created a digital paper trail for their own crime. The district attorney described the case as one of the most clear cases of conspiracy he had seen in 20 years on the job. They documented their own crime, he told me at one of our meetings. Every step of the way they seemed to want to be caught. The charges were extensive and serious. For my parents, the charges include first-degree arson, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit a felony, and filing false reports. Before I was apprehended, they had already begun filing paperwork to blame me. Logan Pierce faces all of the above charges, as well as obstruction of justice for attempting to delete texts from his phone as police approached. Madeline Maddie Cross faces charges of conspiracy, accessory to arson and fraud. The legal process took approximately 11 months, from arrest to sentencing. During that time I moved out of the apartment Madeline Maddie Cross and I shared, found a small one-bedroom apartment across town, and immersed myself in work. The criminal trials occurred in February. Every day I sat in the gallery, watching those who had betrayed me face the consequences for the first time in their privileged lives. The courtroom became almost routine after a few days. Same seats, same bailiff, same court reporter, different witnesses, and evidence, but the same overwhelming proof of their actions. My father tried to maintain his dignity throughout the proceedings, wearing suits, sitting up straight, and acting as if everything was just a misunderstanding that could be resolved by reasonable people. He had this look on his face as if he still expected someone to come in and fix everything for him, as that was how things had always worked before. When the prosecutor showed the security footage of him explaining to Logan Pierce exactly how they planned to make me look guilty, that facade crumbled. In the video, my father was laughing while explaining how my years of being overlooked would make me a credible suspect. He joked that I would never see it coming because I was too busy being the responsible son to notice anything. He explained how my resentment of the family, which had grown over years of favoritism, would make me the ideal fall guy. The jury observed. 14 people who had never met me witnessed the kind of father I had grown up with. Several of them gave me sympathetic looks. After the footage was shown, his attorney requested a recess. My father looked like he wanted to vomit. When they returned, he was unable to make eye contact with anyone. My mom cried through most of her testimony, playing the victim card as hard as she could. She claimed my dad had pressured her, that she was just trying to save the family business, that she never wanted to hurt me, and that she didn't understand the full scope of what they were planning. She stated at one point that she always loved both of her sons equally. Several people in the gallery audibly scoffed at that one. The prosecutor destroyed her on cross-examination. He showed texts where she suggested specific ways to plant evidence in my apartment. He showed messages where she coached Madeline Maddie Cross on exactly what to say to police. He showed video of her researching how to make the fire look like amateur arson, the kind an angry son might commit. He showed her web search history, how to gaslight someone, making someone look unstable, signs of mental breakdown. The crying stopped after that. She just looked defeated. Her attorney didn't even try redirect. Logan Pierce threw everyone under the bus in his own trial. His defense strategy was basically, "I'm too stupid to have planned this myself." Which, fair point. But he was still the one who showed up at the store with gasoline and matches at 2:30 a.m. The jury didn't buy the dumb act, especially after they saw texts where he bragged to Madeline Maddie Cross about how he'd finally be rid of his loser brother once the plan worked. Madeline Maddie Cross's trial was separate. Her defense was that she'd been manipulated by Logan Pierce, that she was a victim of romantic coercion. It might have worked if there wasn't video evidence of her actively participating in planning meetings, initiating conversations about specific details of the scheme, and generally being just as guilty as everyone else. She got convicted on all counts. The sentencing was satisfying. My dad got 9 years in state prison. My mom got 7 years. Logan Pierce got 8 years, plus 4 years of probation after release. Madeline Maddie Cross got 5 years. When the judge read out my father's sentence, I watched his face go completely white. He looked at me from the defendant's table with desperate eyes and mouthed, "I'm sorry." I stared back without expression and slowly shook my head. While the criminal case was pending, I did something my parents never expected. I sued them. With the help of a civil attorney named Thomas Keegan, I filed a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy to deprive me of liberty, and defamation. My parents had spent months telling people I was unstable, that I'd made threats against the family business, all to set up their frame job. Those lies had spread through our community, damaged my reputation, and could have destroyed my career if things had gone differently. Thomas Keegan walked me through every element of the case. The emotional distress claim was obvious, given that my own family had conspired to send me to prison. The conspiracy charge was documented in thousands of text messages, and the defamation. We had witnesses who'd heard my parents spreading lies about my mental state, suppliers who'd been told I was dangerous, and employees who'd been warned to watch out for me. The civil suit also targeted the family business directly. When my parents started Pierce Hardware 18 years ago, my grandfather had invested the startup capital. As part of that investment, there was a clause in the original partnership agreement. If any partner was convicted of a crime involving fraud against the business, their shares would be automatically forfeited. My grandfather had insisted on that clause. He'd seen too many family businesses destroyed by one member's greed or stupidity, and he wanted protection built in. My parents had complained about it at the time, apparently, but eventually agreed because they needed his money. They'd never bothered to remove that clause when Grandpa Harold passed away. They probably forgot it even existed, buried in legal documents they never read. But their conviction for attempting to defraud the insurance company triggered it. And since I was Grandpa Harold's surviving heir from that line of the family, and he'd included me in the original partnership documents as a contingent beneficiary, I had a claim to those forfeited shares. Grandpa Harold had specifically added that provision, according to his old attorney whom I tracked down. He'd told the lawyer that he wanted to make sure the good one was protected if anything ever happened. Thomas Keegan absolutely loved this case. They literally gave you the legal weapon to take everything from them, he said. Your grandfather saw who they really were, and he planned for it. It's poetic justice. The civil case wrapped up about 3 months after the criminal convictions. With my parents facing prison and their assets frozen, they couldn't mount much of a defense. The judgment went entirely in my favor. Between the partnership clause and the civil damages, I ended up with full ownership of Pierce Hardware and Home Supply. The very business my parents had tried to burn down to frame me now belonged entirely to me. When their attorney called to discuss the final settlement details, my dad apparently got on the phone to make one last plea. It's your family legacy, he said. Your grandfather started that business. You can't just take it from us. Grandpa would have wanted me to have it, I replied. You tried to destroy me. I'm just returning the favor. I hung up and never spoke to him again. The store was in rough shape after the fire and years of Logan Pierce's management, but it wasn't beyond saving. The insurance company paid out for the fire damage. Ironically enough, since my family wasn't the one filing the claim anymore, I used those funds, plus some of the civil judgment money, to do a complete renovation of the damaged section, brought in a consultant to assess the business side and then started making changes. First, I let go of everyone who'd been complicit in my parents' scheme. A couple of employees knew something was going on and had kept quiet. They were gone within a week. I kept the honest workers who'd just been doing their jobs, gave them raises, and promoted a longtime manager named Evelyn Moore to handle day-to-day operations. Then I restructured everything, renegotiated supplier contracts, updated the inventory management system, and implemented actual financial controls and reporting, the kinds of basic business practices that should have been in place years ago. Within 7 months, Pierce Hardware went from hemorrhaging money to turning a modest profit. Within 14 months, we were actually doing well. I hired 3 new employees, expanded our tool rental program, and started a contractor loyalty program that brought in steady commercial business. Last month, I officially renamed it. Pierce Hardware is now Pierce & Sons, with a new sign out front. I put up a photo of my grandfather near the register with a small plaque explaining that he founded the original dream. Nearly 3 weeks ago I got a call from the state prison. My dad wanted to add me to his approved visitor list. I declined. A week after that, a letter arrived from my mom, 4 pages of apologies and promises to make things right when she got out. I fed it through the shredder without finishing the first page. Logan Pierce apparently tried to call me from county lockup 4 times before his transfer to state prison. I blocked the number after the first attempt. Maddie Cross's mother, reached out through Facebook, asking if I could find it in my heart to forgive her daughter. I blocked her too. My uncle Frank Dalton, my dad's brother, who'd always been the family black sheep, drove down to visit last month. We walked through the store together and he told me stories about my grandfather I'd never heard. How Grandpa Harold always worried that my dad was taking shortcuts. How he'd specifically mentioned me in his will because he wanted to make sure I was taken care of if anything happened. He saw what your parents were doing to you, Frank said. He told me once that you were the only one in that house with any integrity. Guess he was right. Frank's been helping me with the store on weekends. Turns out he knows a lot about hardware from his years in construction. We're talking about making him a minority partner if things keep going well. I'm dating someone new. Her name is Claire Whitman. She works at the coffee shop down the street from the store. We've been seeing each other for about 4 months now. She knows the broad strokes of what happened with my family and doesn't treat me like damaged goods. We're taking it slow, which is fine by me. The store had its best quarter ever last month. I hired another full-time employee, and we're looking at expanding into the empty unit next door. The landlord gave me a good deal on the lease since I've been paying rent on time, unlike my parents, who were apparently 3 months behind when everything went down. So, that's where things stand. Reddit. My parents are in prison, my brother's in prison, my ex-girlfriend's in prison. I own the business they tried to burn down to frame me, and it's actually thriving for the first time in years.